In a morgue, tears streamed down the face of a woman believed to be dead. The nurse couldn't comprehend what she was witnessing. Watch until the end of the story and witness the moment when the door to a secret that will change everyone's destiny is opened. It was early morning at St. Mary's Hospital. The silence in the hallways was heavy, almost suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of a heart monitor lost in another area. The smell of alcohol mixed with the cold air made it clear that everyone there was accustomed to the presence of death. Lauren Miller, a nurse with tired eyes and a sensitive heart, held a clipboard against her chest. She had been on her feet for hours. The early shift always seemed longer than any other. She had just finished checking on the patients in the pediatric ward, and before sitting down for a moment, decided to go to the cold room to check the records of the body that had arrived a few minutes earlier. As she walked, her rubber-soled shoes clicked against the smooth floor, echoing in the empty hallways. Each step sounded louder than normal. She tried to distract herself by thinking about her mother, who was waiting for her at home with a hot cup of coffee at dawn. But soon the image of the new body that had just arrived came back to her mind. As she opened the heavy door to the cold room, an icy wind ran through her arms, making her skin bristle. She took a deep breath. She was used to that place, but she never stopped feeling the heaviness of the silence inside. The metal drawers lined up in rows, the white sheets covering motionless figures. Everything seemed to scream the same thing: the end. In the center of the room, on a stretcher still waiting for a destination, was the newly arrived body, an elderly woman covered up to her neck with a light-colored sheet, her face half visible. Lauren approached slowly, as if approaching an altar. She grabbed the file attached to the board next to it. There was no name, only a cold description. Woman, approximately 70 years old. Arrived by ambulance, deceased. Nothing else. Not a document, not an ID, just no one. Lauren frowned. No name. She murmured to herself, her voice almost swallowed by the cold. She thought about how hard it must be for someone to arrive like this, nameless, with no one to ask about her. No one running around saying, "Where's my mom? My grandmother?" She gripped the board tightly. She always wondered what it would be like to leave this world, with no one to hold your hand, without anyone even remembering your name. She looked back at the woman's face. Despite the rigidity of death, she had a gentle expression. She wasn't like other bodies that arrived with marks of pain or violence. This woman seemed peaceful. Lauren took a step back, leaned against the cold wall, and stood there for a few seconds. The clock on her wrist read 2:37 in the morning. The hospital was asleep, but something in that room wouldn't let her leave. She took a deep breath, rubbed her tired eyes, and went back to writing on the paper. The silence was so great that the scratching of the pen sounded loud. "Well," she whispered, as if talking to the woman, "may God give her rest." The silence in the cold room enveloped her like a heavy blanket. All she could hear was the sound of the air conditioner, pushing the icy wind and making the lamps on the ceiling tremble. Suddenly, a soft noise, almost like a muffled moan, made her look up from the board. She stood still, listened again. Nothing. She laughed nervously, trying to convince herself. "Oh, I'm hearing things. It must be my imagination." But something bothered her. Her heart began to race uncontrollably. Her feet, as if they had a life of their own, began to carry her back toward the stretcher. The woman's body remained motionless, covered up to her neck. Her pale face looked the same. Lauren moved closer, took a step, then another. The silence was broken only by the sound of her breathing, which was becoming shorter and heavier. She felt the cold of the room seeping into her bones, rising up the back of her neck, making every hair stand on end. "No, it can't be," she whispered, almost without a voice. And then first a strange gleam appeared in one of the closed eyes. Then, little by little, a drop formed in the corner. It rolled down the wrinkled skin and fell onto the white sheet, leaving a wet mark. Lauren opened her eyes wide, dropping the board, which fell to the floor with a loud bang. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. She covered her mouth with her hands, trying to hold back the scream that rose in her throat. "My God," she murmured in a trembling voice. "This can't be." She moved closer, leaning her face over the woman's. The coldness of her skin contrasted with that tear, warm, recent, alive, and another fell after it, running slowly down her cheek. Lauren took a step back, tripped over her own leg, and leaned against the cold wall to keep from falling. Her heart was beating so hard, it felt like it was going to explode. "This isn't right. This isn't right," she repeated as if trying to convince herself that she was dreaming. The air in the room felt heavier. The tears kept falling silently, one after another, as if the body were crying. Lauren closed her eyes tightly and pinched her arm. Nothing changed. It wasn't her imagination. Fear filled her completely. Her breathing was ragged. Her hands were shaking. The nurse murmured, "Holy God, what am I seeing?" And she stood there, paralyzed, staring at the impossible scene in front of her. The cold in the room no longer came only from the air conditioning. It was the cold of fear, a fear that froze to the soul. Suddenly, as if something were pushing her, she dropped everything and ran out the door. The hospital corridors were empty. The echo of her footsteps running sounded like screams in the silence. At every corner, she almost slipped, her sweaty hands trying to hold on to the white walls. My God," she repeated between sobs, unable to think straight. When she finally reached the chief physician's door, she knocked desperately. Doctor Andrew." The door opened slowly, revealing the doctor in his wrinkled gown, his eyes sunken from not having slept in hours. He looked at her confused. "What's wrong, Lauren? Are you pale? Did something happen with the patients?" Lauren tried to speak, but no sound came out. She swallowed hard, her hands shaking, until, her chest heaving, she cried out, "Are you crying? Or is the body that arrived crying?" Andrew frowned. It took him a few seconds to understand. "What do you mean she's crying?" he asked with a nervous smile, thinking that maybe it was a misunderstanding. "Lauren, are you exhausted? Maybe you're seeing things." She shook her head violently, her eyes wide open and filled with tears. "No, doctor, I saw it. I swear. I saw the tears falling. I saw it." The doctor sighed deeply. Even though he didn't believe it, he realized it wasn't a fantasy. He had known Lauren for years. He knew she wasn't the type to get scared by anything. Her expression was one of pure panic. Without saying another word, he grabbed the stethoscope from the desk and quickly followed her out. Lauren was still shaking. She clutched her gown against her chest as she guided him through the cold corridors. As they entered the cold room, the icy air hit them hard. Andrew walked toward the stretcher. At first he looked from a distance with a doubtful expression, but suddenly, the impossible appeared before his eyes. The woman lying there, motionless, had a wet face. A new tear slowly rolled down to her ear. Andrew stood still. He became rigid, white as the wall behind him. The hand holding the stethoscope began to tremble. "Jay, it can't be," he murmured, his voice almost muffled. Lauren, still breathing heavily, squeezed his arm. "I told you, doctor. I told you. She's crying." He looked at her, unable to respond. The silence in that room screamed, and for the first time in all his years of work, Andrew Collins felt the floor disappear beneath his feet. He took a deep breath, as if gathering courage, and approached the stretcher. His hands, steady from years of experience, were now shaking. He stretched his fingers toward the woman's wrinkled neck. The cold of her skin almost made him pull away, but then he felt something faint, distant, like a whisper in the darkness. But it was there. Andrew's eyes opened wide. His body shuddered. He placed the stethoscope on the woman's chest and turned to Lauren, his voice almost shouting, "She's alive!" Lauren covered her mouth with her hands, and a sob escaped her lips. Her eyes filled with tears. "My God, doctor, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy." Without wasting another second, Andrew shouted down the hall, "Help, quick!" The sound echoed throughout the sleeping hospital. In a few moments, hurried footsteps began to approach. Nurses rushed in, still confused. "Prepare the stretcher! Bring oxygen now!" Andrew shouted in a firm but urgent voice. Lauren held the woman's hand, squeezing it gently, as if she wanted to hold on to the life that was slipping away every second. "Hang on. Please don't go now," she whispered with tears streaming down her face. 2 nurses arrived with equipment. Another pushed the transfer stretcher. Andrew coordinated everything with quick gestures, But inside his mind was boiling. How is this possible? He muttered under his breath. The paramedics. How could they not have noticed? One of the nurses asked, not understanding. Doctor, she wasn't pronounced dead on arrival? Andrew replied with contained rage, almost spitting out the words. Dead. Nothing. They brought in a woman alive as if she were dead. Incompetence. As they placed the woman on the new stretcher, he approached again, checking her vital signs. Her pulse was irregular, almost disappearing. Her chest rose and fell with a painfully weak rhythm. Come on, you have a chance, he said, more to himself than to the team. Lauren walked beside him, never letting go of the woman's hand for a moment. She felt that weakness, that fragility, but she also felt that there was life. A spark still lingered there. The cold room, which minutes before had been a place of death, was now filled with voices, running footsteps, and machines turning on. The silence of death had been broken by the desperate noise of the fight against time. The stretcher raced through the corridors of St. Mary's Hospital as if it were a ship in the middle of a storm. Nurses pushed it hurriedly. Others cleared the way. The sound of the wheels screeching on the waxed floor mingled with the firm shout of Andrew, who kept giving orders. Let's go, quick! Oxygen ready, monitor on, he said, without taking his eyes off the old lady's face. Lauren ran alongside, holding the woman's hand as if it were a thread about to break. Sweat ran down her forehead, even though the hospital was cold. A silent prayer repeated itself in her chest. Don't let her go. No, now the door to the intensive care unit slammed open. The air smelled of disinfectant, and hope mixed with fear. The team moved quickly. Each knew what to do. They placed the woman on the bed, turned on the monitor, and a soft, irregular beeping filled the room. Andrew placed the stethoscope on her chest, closed his eyes for a second, and whispered, "She's still with us, Lauren." With a trembling voice, he asked quietly, "Who is she, doctor?" He just shook his head, looking at the wrinkles on the woman's face. "I don't know. There's no name. There's nothing. There's nothing." On the file, there was only one cold piece of information. Elderly woman found unconscious in the square. No ID. Pronounced dead. The couple who brought her to the ambulance had already left without knowing who she was. To them, she was just a stranger lying on the ground. Lauren pressed her lips together sadly, alone, with no one else around. It was as if she didn't exist. Andrew looked at her with an expression of anger and sadness at the same time, and on top of that, marked as dead. Those ambulance workers took a deep breath, trying to calm down. How can anyone confuse life with death? The monitor beeped louder for a moment. The woman's heart was beating irregularly, but it was beating. Lauren wiped away a tear before it fell onto the sheet. "She's fighting, doctor. Even though she has no one with her, she's still fighting." The room fell silent for a few seconds. Everyone stared at this unknown woman. The soft beeping of the monitor was like fragile music saying, "I'm still here." And in that small hospital lost in London, a nameless miracle had just begun. The entire night passed like an eternity. The constant sound of the machines, the irregular beeps, the woman's almost invisible breathing, everything filled the room with a silence that weighed more than any words. Lauren stayed there, sitting by the bed, never taking her eyes off the nameless woman. The clock on the wall read 6:12 in the morning when something happened. First, there was a slight movement of her eyelids, so slight that Lauren thought it was just a spasm. But then, slowly, the woman's eyes opened. Lauren stood up immediately, her heart beating fast. She approached carefully, as if afraid to startle her. The woman's eyes were filled with tears. They were deep, tired eyes, but at the same time alive, filled with a pain that needed no words. Lauren leaned forward, her voice low and soft. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" No words came out. They were deep, tired eyes, but at the same time alive, filled with a pain that needed no words. Lauren leaned over in a low, soft voice. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" No words came out, just that look, a long, steady gaze that seemed to pierce through Lauren's body and touch her soul directly. The nurse swallowed hard and took the hand of the lady, who was cold and fragile, like a twig about to break. Suddenly, the lady squeezed her hand tightly, with a strength that did not seem to come from such a weak body. Lauren shuddered. her eyes filling with tears. "Oh my God," she whispered, almost without a voice. That squeeze wasn't just physical. It was a request. It was a silent scream. It was as if the woman was saying, "Don't leave me," without having to speak. Lauren sat back down, holding her hand tightly, and couldn't stop a tear from falling onto the wrinkled skin of that hand. I know that look," she murmured, her chest tight, as if she had just found a part of herself that was lost. The old woman remained silent, just staring, with tears slowly rolling down her face, but there was no need to speak. At that moment, her eyes said it all. They said life, they said fear, they said sadness. And Lauren, without knowing why, felt that that look was calling her name, as if she had been waiting for her for a long, long time. Even while doing other things, Lauren's mind wouldn't stop. The old woman's eyes haunted her even when she blinked. There was something there that didn't make sense, an invisible thread pulling at her heart. That morning, unable to rest, she decided to return to the cold room. She pushed open the heavy door, and the icy air enveloped her once again. The place was silent, as it always was. In a corner on a metal table were the few things that had arrived with the body: a worn plastic bag, some crumpled papers, objects of no apparent value. Lauren began to search carefully. She pulled out bingo cards marked with pen, as if the woman had spent nights dreaming of a prize she never won. She found a small bottle of cheap perfume, already half empty, that still had a sweet, simple scent, like someone trying to maintain a little dignity in the middle of nowhere. She sighed and continued searching through old papers, pharmacy receipts, a broken pen, until her fingers touched something different. An old handkerchief, yellowed by time, folded with great care. There was something inside. Lauren unfolded it slowly, as if she were opening a secret, and there it was, a faded photo, almost erased by the years. In the picture, a little girl held hands with a young woman in a white uniform, a nurse. Lauren's heart began to beat faster. She brought the photo closer to her face, trying to see it better. Time had faded the colors, but the tenderness in their eyes was clear. A bond, a connection, something that would not fade. She stood still in silence, her fingers trembling as she held that fragile piece of paper. "Who are you?" she whispered, as if talking to the woman in the photo. At that moment, something inside her told her that this photo was not just a detail, it was a clue. That night at home, still unable to stop thinking about it, Lauren showed the photo to her mother. The reaction was immediate. The woman put her hand to her chest. Her eyes widened. Her breath was taken away. "Holy Virgin!" she exclaimed, almost dropping the cup she was holding in her hand. That woman, that lady. Lauren approached her worriedly. "What's wrong, Mom? Do you know her?" Her mother's eyes filled with tears. Her voice came out shaking. "She was your grandmother's friend. She disappeared over 20 years ago. Everyone said she had died. But no, she just left. Grandma's friend." Lauren couldn't believe it. But who was she? Her mother took a deep breath, clutching the photo as if it were something sacred. "I don't remember her name, but she was a good woman, a very good woman. She took care of abandoned children. She was like a saint among us. Everyone loved her. And then no one heard from her again." Lauren's heart beat faster. The pieces began to fall into place, and the nameless old woman no longer seemed so unknown. Something bigger was hidden in that look that had touched her so much. Lauren couldn't sleep after what her mother told her. The image of that woman in the photo wouldn't leave her head. There was something unresolved, a story that needed to be told. The next morning, she decided to look for answers. She took the photo, put it in the pocket of her robe, and went to a nursing home in the city, where she remembered that a very old nun still lived there, known for keeping memories as if they were treasures, and who was a friend of her grandmother. The nursing home smelled of incense and old wood. The walls were covered with crucifixes and portraits of saints. The nun, bent over by the years, walked slowly, leaning on a cane. Her eyes, despite her age, shone attentively, like someone who carries more memories than strength. Lauren approached respectfully, introduced herself, said who she was, and showed her the photo. "Mother, I need your help. Do you recognize this woman?" The nun adjusted her glasses on her wrinkled face, took the photo with trembling hands, and remained silent for several seconds. her eyes filled with tears. "My God," she whispered. "It's her. It's Catherine." Lauren leaned forward anxiously. "Catherine, did you know her?" The nun took a deep breath, as if opening a drawer that had been closed for many years. Everyone knew her. She was a woman with a giant heart. She always helped the children. She had a gift for caring, for comforting, but her voice broke. One day she just disappeared. She vanished. How? The nun closed her eyes as if searching for the strength to continue. "I remember it well. It was the day she brought a little girl to be adopted. She promised to come back, but she never did. No one ever heard from her again. It was as if the earth had swallowed her up." Lauren felt a shiver run down her spine. She pressed the photo against her chest. What girl? Who was that girl? The nun hesitated. She lowered her head. A girl who was left at the orphanage when she was very young. Catherine brought her one day wrapped in an old blanket. She came with a crumpled piece of paper. "Please take care of her. I'll be back one day." Lauren's eyes filled with tears, and she turned away. The nun shook her head sadly. "Never. The girl grew up here, but she was soon adopted by a family. We knew she was Catherine's daughter. The resemblance was clear in both their eyes. But when a mother abandons her child, it's because she's not ready. We didn't go looking for her. We let fate decide." Lauren covered her face with her hands in shock. "So that woman left her own daughter." The nun clutched the crucifix hanging on her chest, as if asking forgiveness for a lifetime of silence. "Yes. And from that day on, Catherine never reappeared." The room fell silent. Lauren felt a deep pain, as if it were not just the old woman's story, but also a wound that came from many generations. Something inside her told her that this abandonment was not just a mistake. It was a tragedy that was not yet understood. With each passing day, Catherine's fragility became more apparent. The machines around the bed seemed to be sustaining what little life she had left. Lauren, tireless, stayed by her side, as if just being there could prevent loneliness from taking her away before her time. Catherine would open her eyes for a few minutes, then fade away again. She was like a flickering flame, about to be blown out by the wind. She didn't speak. She tried, but no sound came out. The air only escaped in broken sighs that hurt the hearts of those who heard them. One afternoon, Lauren noticed that Catherine was moving her hand insistently, as if asking for something. She approached her. "Do you want some water? Do you want me to call the doctor?" Catherine shook her head slowly and gestured with her fingers, asking for something to write with. Lauren ran to the table, grabbed a notepad and a pen, and placed them in Catherine's fragile hands, which could barely hold them. Catherine took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment, and with great effort began to scratch letters onto the paper. Her hand trembled, and the letters came out crooked and almost illegible. Each letter seemed to come from her last reserve of strength. Lauren held the paper with her heart racing, praying that the ink wouldn't run out. When Catherine finished, she dropped the pen from her hand and closed her eyes in exhaustion. Lauren looked at the crumpled paper and saw a single word: Relina. Her blood ran cold, her eyes filled with tears. She knelt beside the bed and whispered, as if she didn't want anyone else to hear her, "Rachel. Who is Rachel, my God?" Without wasting any time, she ran down the hallways until she found Dr. Andrew. She entered his office without knocking, holding the paper tightly. "Doctor, look at this." She wrote it down. Andrew took the paper, frowned, and read it several times. "Regan," he repeated, intrigued. "Maybe it's a name, someone important to her." He turned on the computer and searched for old files, forgotten documents that almost no one ever looked at. He typed in the name and searched through folders. The silence in the office was heavy, broken only by the rapid clicking of the keyboard. Suddenly, Andrew stopped. His eyes were fixed on the screen. "Here," he murmured, calling Lauren over. She leaned in, and there it was. An adoption record from many years ago. The girl's name was Rachel. Andrew leaned back in his chair, breathing deeply. "It's her. It can't be a coincidence." Lauren brought her hands to her face, overcome with emotion. "So this girl, this Rachel, was adopted. She exists, Doctor." Andrew looked at the piece of paper with the handwritten name, then at the file on the computer, and for the first time, he understood. Catherine wasn't just fighting death. She was trying to shout a truth to the world that she had kept to herself her entire life. Lauren stared at the computer screen, as if those shaky letters that said filler were burning her soul. The silence was heavy. The sound of the air conditioner seemed like a roar inside her head, until she took a deep breath, turned to Andrew, and spoke in an almost childlike tone, as if asking for something impossible. "Doctor, what if I go look for her?" Andrew looked up slowly, crossed his arms, and remained silent for a few seconds. He watched the worried look on Lauren's face. "Do you think that's the right thing to do?" "I don't know if it's the right thing to do," she said, her voice trembling, "but I feel like it's the right thing to do." This woman, this lady, didn't write that name for nothing. It's as if it were her last wish. The doctor sighed, resting his hands on the desk. He had always been very reserved, but faced with this story, even he was moved. "Lauren, sometimes we get involved in things that don't concern us," but he stopped himself. He took a deep breath and looked her in the eyes. "Sometimes the heart is in a hurry. If you feel you must do it, then do it." His words were like a signal for Lauren's impulse to turn into action. She nodded, wiped her eyes discreetly, and hurried out of the office. The first place she went was the same nursing home where she had spoken with the nun. She found her in the courtyard, sitting on a wooden chair, praying quietly with a rosary between her fingers. "Mother, I need your help again." Lauren showed her the faded photo and the piece of paper where Catherine had written Rachel. "She left this name, Rachel. She is very ill. It's like it was her last wish." The nun pressed her lips together, her gaze lost on the horizon. "Rachel," she murmured, as if trying to bring back a distant memory. Yes, she was the girl Catherine left at the orphanage. Lauren moved closer, distraught. "Do you know what happened to her after the adoption? Who was it? Where is she?" The nun paused, took a deep breath, and replied slowly. "She was adopted by a couple who weren't from here. I remember they were from far away, from the north of the country. A good couple, simple people, but with a big heart." Lauren's hands began to sweat. "Do you have any records? Any information?" The nun stood up carefully and walked to a small room filled with dusty folders, old files, and papers that were almost falling apart. She opened a wooden drawer and rummaged through sheets of paper that had yellowed with age. After a few minutes, she took out a thin folder marked only with a few faded numbers. "Look, this should be confidential. No one should see these things without a judge's permission. But I'm old now, right? It's okay to help. Here you are." She handed it to Lauren, who took it as if it were something sacred. Inside were a few papers, the signatures of the adoptive parents, an old address, official stamps from more than 20 years old. But it was enough. It was a clue. Lauren hugged the papers to her chest. Her heart was beating fast, as if fate had just opened a door that had been closed for years. "So this is it," she whispered. "I'm going to find her." Lauren spent days poring over papers, making phone calls, and visiting forgotten offices. Each old address was a clue that had almost been erased until she found the name Rachel Alvarez, teacher, in a school record in the north of the country. Her heart was pounding. It was as if fate had written this encounter before she was born. She took the school's number and called. On the other end of the line, a secretary answered in a calm voice. Lauren carefully explained that she really needed to talk to Rachel. She didn't tell her everything, just asked to meet her in person. Days later, Lauren traveled to the small town. The school was simple, with colorful walls and the sound of children running in the playground. The air smelled of chili and paint. When Rachel appeared at the door of the teacher's lounge, Lauren recognized her immediately, even though she had never seen her before. There was something about her features, her deep gaze, that reminded her of the woman in the hospital bed. Rachel had her hair pulled back in a practical style and was wearing simple teacher's clothes. There was a firmness in her demeanor, but also a hidden sadness, like someone who holds unanswered questions. "Are you Mrs. Lauren?" she asked, a little wary. "Yes," Lauren replied, trying to control her emotions. "Thank you for seeing me." They sat down in a small, quiet room. Lauren took a deep breath before speaking. "Rachel, I don't know how to say this. I discovered something that could change a lot of things in your life." Rachel frowned. "What's going on?" Lauren took the old photo out of her pocket, unfolded it carefully, and placed it on the table. "This woman is in the hospital where I work. We found this photo among her things, and she wrote your name on a piece of paper. Rachel, hesitant, reached for the photo. When her eyes fell on the faded image, tears came without warning. Her fingers trembled over the paper, as if they wanted to touch that lost past. She held the photo to her chest, closed her eyes, and a sob escaped her. I always dreamed about her. Lauren remained silent, her eyes filled with tears, letting Rachel experience that moment. Since I was a child, Regalina continued, her voice breaking. I saw that face in my dreams. I didn't know if it was a memory or something I made up, but I knew there was someone I lost. She wiped her face, trying to calm down, but her eyes still shone with emotion. You're telling me that this woman could be my mom? Lauren nodded, her voice firm but shaky. Yes, Rachel. Everything seems to indicate that it is. Silence filled the room. Outside, the children's laughter sounded distant, as if the world had stopped inside. Rachel held the photo with both hands. Her whole body was shaking. I don't know what to feel, she murmured. It's joy. It's anger. It's fear. I just know that I always waited for her, even though I didn't know it. And for the first time, Lauren saw in those eyes the same silent pain she had seen in Catherine's eyes. Two lives marked by absence about to be reunited. The drive to the hospital seemed endless to Rachel. In the car seat, she held the faded photo as if it were a map of the past. Her heart was beating so hard it hurt. 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind. What if it's not her? What if it is? What am I going to say to her? There's still time. When she entered St. Mary's Hospital, the smell of medicine, the echo of footsteps in the hallways, and the cold light from the spotlights created a different kind of silence. A silence of waiting. Lauren was there waiting for her with a serious but kind expression. She's in room 17, she said softly, touching Rachel's arm. Ben. The sound of her words seemed to disappear into the air. Rachel walked slowly, as if each step were a plunge into something she didn't know she was ready to face. When the door opened, her world stopped. Catherine was lying in bed, connected to wires and machines. Her chest rose and fell slowly, in an almost lazy rhythm. Her face was marked by time, by the streets she walked, by the nights without a roof over her head. But beneath those wrinkles was something Rachel recognized instantly. A feature, a shape, a memory stored since childhood. She couldn't speak. Her throat closed up. Tears came before words. She approached with timid steps. The sound of her heels echoed on the cold floor. Rachel reached out hesitantly, as if afraid to break the image that was real and yet impossible. When her fingers touched Catherine's skin, a shiver ran through her body. She was cold, but she was alive. She left her hand on the old woman's, squeezing gently as if asking permission to be there. Time suddenly froze. There were no machines, no hospital, no white walls, just the two of them. Catherine, in a light coma, did not open her eyes, but her expression changed. A silent tear rolled down her cheek. Rachel brought her other hand to her chest, sobbing quietly. "Mom," she whispered so softly that it was almost lost in the air. Lauren, standing near the door, brought her hand to her mouth to hold back the tears. She knew that at that moment, no explanations or questions were necessary. It was a meeting of souls, not words. Rachel leaned closer, resting her forehead on Catherine's wrinkled hand. The tears came uncontrollably, wetting her skin. "I waited for you. All my life I waited for you." Catherine didn't answer, but the tear that kept falling was the silent answer that came from the past. And in that simple hospital room, two lives separated by decades were reunited without saying a word, because sometimes love doesn't need a voice, it just needs to exist. Time seemed to pass very slowly in room 17. Catherine spent her days between silence and brief moments of awakening, but one clear morning, when the light came through the window and cast soft shadows on the wall, she managed to speak. Her voice was weak, hoarse, as if she had sand in her throat. Lauren was there, tucking in the sheets. Upon hearing that sound, she stopped immediately. She turned around with her eyes wide open. "Ma'am, are you trying to say something?" Catherine took a deep breath. She motioned for Lauren to come closer. "I wrote Rachel," she whispered, each syllable coming out with effort. "Yes, I saw it," Lauren replied, sitting down beside her. "Who is Rachel?" The woman's eyes filled with tears. It took her a few seconds to continue speaking. Sam, daughter? The nurse felt a lump in her throat and leaned closer, holding her hand. Your daughter. Catherine closed her eyes and let the air out slowly, as if remembering a very old weight. I was sick, very sick. I was living on the streets. I had nothing to give her. She paused for a long time. Her voice was shaking. I didn't want her to grow up with me, without a home, without food. Lauren already had tears streaming down her face. So you left her at the orphanage? Yes, Catherine replied, her lips trembling. But I wrote that I would come back when I had a roof over my head, when I had the strength. She took a deep breath, trying to hold back the tears that were coming. But I never could. Every time I tried, life pulled me back to the streets. And one day, when I came back, they told me she had been adopted. They couldn't tell me where they took her. The silence that followed was very heavy. Lauren held her hand tightly, as if she wanted to carry some of the pain. Catherine looked at the ceiling with tears slowly falling. I failed as a mother. No, Lauren said, squeezing her hand tightly. Don't say that. You did what you thought was best. The woman turned her face slowly, looking at the nurse. Her gaze was deep, full of guilt, but the guilt never left here. She touched her chest with her free hand. I spent years sleeping in squares, on benches at terminals, but I never stopped looking for her. Lauren felt that every word was like an open wound. You helped other children, didn't you? Catherine nodded slowly, her gaze lost in the past. Yes, whenever I could. I took care of them, shared the bread I found, mended old clothes, told stories. It was as if I was taking care of my daughter through them. The room fell silent. Only the sound of the machines filled the space. Lauren wiped away her tears and whispered, You carried this cross alone all your life. Catherine closed her eyes again, tired, but with a fragile peace on her face. I just wanted her to know someday that I never stopped loving her. Lauren, unable to say anything, just pressed her hand against her chest, and in that moment, the pain of a lifetime seemed to mix with a small thread of hope. The hospital was already silent when Andrew found Lauren sitting on a bench in the hallway with her head in her hands, her eyes red from crying. Hidden behind his glasses, he stopped in front of her, not knowing how to begin. Lauren lifted her face, and her tired gaze met his. Andrew sat down next to her, took a deep breath and remained silent for a few seconds, as if he needed the courage to open an old wound. You know, Lauren, he began in a low voice. I've spent my whole life taking care of people, but I was never able to take care of the one who needed me most. She looked at him curiously, not understanding. What are you talking about, doctor? Andrew clasped his hands together, as if carrying something very heavy. My mom swallowed a pill. Andrew clasped his hands together, as if carrying something very heavy. My mom swallowed hard. My mom died without forgiving me. The silence grew heavier. Lauren didn't say anything. She just let him continue. I was young, angry at everything. She raised me alone, did everything she could to give me an education, food, dignity, but all I saw were her mistakes. We always fought. I said things to her that still hurt me deep down inside. He touched his chest, his voice breaking, and the last day, before she left, she wanted to talk to me, but I didn't go. I didn't want to listen to her. Tears fell slowly. Andrew, the doctor, who always seemed so strong, now looked like a lost child standing in front of her. When I arrived, it was too late. She was already gone, and I'll never know her last words. Lauren took a deep breath, moved. Doctor, it's not just your fault. Life is hard. Sometimes we don't know how much time we have, but Andrew shook his head. The guilt won't leave me, Lauren. And when I see that woman, Catherine, I see an opportunity. An opportunity. He looked at her with eyes filled with tears. Tears of wanting to do something different, of allowing a mother and a daughter to be reunited, of not letting the same thing happen to them that happened to me. I couldn't listen to my mom, but maybe I can help that daughter listen to hers. Lauren felt a lump in her throat. They remained silent for a few seconds, sitting side by side, sharing the pain. And in that cold hallway, they were no longer just a doctor and a nurse. They were two broken hearts, trying to find a way to heal each other's wounds through Catherine's life. The room was in penumbra. Only the beeping of the machines filled the silence. Rachel was sitting next to the bed, looking at Catherine's fragile face. Her hands were clasped together, as if she were afraid to let go and life would slip away again. Lauren entered slowly, brought a chair and placed it next to her. She remained silent for a while, respecting the moment, until Rachel took a deep breath and broke the silence that hung heavy in the air. "I always knew," she said softly, her voice breaking. Ever since she was a child, she knew she wasn't her biological daughter. Lauren moved closer without saying anything, just listening. "My adoptive parents never hid it from me. They were good people. They gave me everything they could, but even so, there was an emptiness inside me. I grew up dreaming of a face, a hug, a smell I had never experienced." She ran her hand over her face, trying not to cry, and that face was hers. Ah, it always was. The tears began to fall, but along with them came a tremor in her voice filled with old rage. But along with that dream came the question that ate away at me. Why? Why did she leave me? Lauren approached her and touched her shoulder affectionately. "Rachel, do you understand?" Rachel looked up with red eyes. "I spent nights without sleep thinking about it. If she loved me so much, why did she leave me? I grew up trying to be strong, to believe that there was a reason, but deep down, part of me just felt anger." Her breathing became heavy. She squeezed Catherine's hand tighter, as if trying to pull answers from a body that could no longer speak. "And now I'm confused. That anger I carried for so many years is mixing with this pain, with this hope. I don't know what to feel." Lauren let the silence speak for a few seconds. Then she said softly, "Sometimes the heart is divided. Rachel keeps love and pain in the same place." Rachel lowered her head and cried silently. The tears wet Catherine's wrinkled hand. She wanted to hate, but seeing her now, she only felt that she missed her. And in that moment, the anger that had been burning inside her seemed to dissolve into tears, leaving only the confusion of a daughter who had waited her whole life to understand the abandonment, and now had her mother in front of her. The days passed slowly in the hospital, and Lauren felt that every minute with Catherine weighed as much as a lifetime. One rainy afternoon, while arranging the little box where they kept the old lady's things, she found something different. Among bingo cards, crumpled papers, and a rosary worn by time, there was an envelope folded many times, now yellowed, with edges torn by the years. Lauren opened it carefully, as if she had found a secret kept with fire. Inside was a handwritten letter, the ink almost faded, but still legible. She read it slowly, feeling the weight of each word. "My daughter, forgive me. I never stopped loving you. I dreamed of coming back, but life was too hard on me. I didn't have the courage to show up with nothing, unable to give you what you deserved. Maybe someday you'll understand. If I don't have time, may God bring my love to you." Tears filled Lauren's eyes. The handwriting was shaky, but full of feeling. Keeping that for so long was like carrying a caged heart. She knew that letter couldn't stay hidden. She walked down the hallways until she found Rachel, who was sitting silently in the next room, holding her sleeping mother's hand. "Rachel," she said softly, "I found something. I think it's for you." Rachel looked at her confused. Lauren handed her the envelope. Rachel's hands trembled as she took it. It took a few seconds before she had the courage to open it. When her eyes read the crooked lines, her world fell apart. Tears began to fall before she finished reading. Her chest rose and fell quickly, the tears she had held back exploding in loud sobs. She held the letter to her chest, pressing it against her heart, as if she wanted to glue there the absence of a lifetime. "I never stopped loving you," she repeated between sobs. "My God, my mom, she never forgot me." Lauren moved, knelt beside her, and hugged her tightly. "See, Queen? She never abandoned you here inside." She touched her chest with her hand. "Her love was always with you." Rachel cried like a little girl, the crumpled paper in her trembling hands. "I spent years feeling angry, and now I just wish I had received a hug from her sooner." The room became small in the face of the pain and love that overflowed. The letter that had never been sent had finally reached its destination, and in Rachel's tears, the decades of silence became a cry of love that no longer needed to remain trapped in time. The light rain that morning seemed to accompany Rachel's heart. After spending the whole night hugging the letter that was never delivered, she decided to return to the hospital. The walk to room 17 was slow, each step carrying a weight she couldn't explain. Upon entering, she found Catherine lying there, fragile, breathing with difficulty, but with her eyes open, fixed on the ceiling, as if searching for memories in the shadows of the wall. Rachel approached silently and sat down on the edge of the bed. She arranged the wires coming out of her mother's arm and gently held her wrinkled hand. Catherine turned her face slowly and with dry lips tried to form words. Her voice came out like a sigh, so soft that Rachel had to lean in to hear. "Do you remember the park?" Catherine whispered with painful pauses. Rahina felt a chill. She remained silent for a few seconds, swallowing hard, until she replied in a broken voice. "Yes, I dreamed of a swing, always the same swing. I was sitting there, someone pushing me, gently. I would wake up with that memory, but I never knew where it came from." Catherine closed her eyes, and although she was weak, a tear escaped her. "It was me," she said in a very low voice. "I was pushing you. You were laughing. You were shouting, 'Higher, Mom, higher!'" Rachel's tears flowed uncontrollably. She brought her free hand to her face, sobbing. So it was real. It wasn't just a dream. It was you. Catherine squeezed her hand with what little strength she had left, and her eyes filled with silent tears. There was nothing left to explain. At that moment, mother and daughter were united, not by abandonment or lost time, but by a simple memory of a swing, of an afternoon that fate could not erase. Rachel rested her forehead on her mother's, crying softly. "I looked for you here inside me all my life, and now I know that you were always with me." Catherine couldn't respond with words, but the look they shared, full of tears, said everything that silence could not. And in that hospital room, time ceased to exist. Only two souls remained that recognized each other, united by a memory so simple and so sacred, the swing in a forgotten park, where love never stopped living. Rachel spent the night sitting in the hard chair next to the bed. She watched every movement of Catherine's fragile chest, every soft breath, every silent tear that fell. Even though she was asleep, Rachel's heart was tight, but at the same time a certainty grew inside her like a flame. In the morning, when the light of the sun came through the curtains of the room, Rachel made a decision. She held her mother's hand firmly, and looking at Lauren and Andrew, spoke with a trembling voice, but one full of truth. "I want to take her home." Lauren opened her eyes in surprise. "Rachel, are you sure? It's a lot of responsibility." "Yes, I'm sure," she replied without hesitation. "She gave me life. Now I can give her back a little bit. Even if it's only for a short time. I don't want her to spend the rest of her days staring at a hospital ceiling. She deserves to feel at home." Silence filled the room. Andrew crossed his arms thoughtfully, then approached and placed his hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll do it together. If that's what you want, we'll help you." That same afternoon, the news spread among the team. Nurses, doctors, assistants, everyone who had ever met Catherine in any way went to room 17. She was no longer the woman with no name. Now she was Catherine, the mother who had been found, the woman who had cried tears of life in a cold room, and who had awakened something in the hearts of everyone. One by one, they entered to say goodbye. Some brought flowers, others letters, even drawings made by patients. The tears were inevitable. Catherine, lying there, weak, received each gesture with a small smile, but one full of gratitude. Andrew was the last to approach her. He took her hand carefully, as if holding something sacred, his eyes filled with tears, his voice firm but broken by emotion. "Thank you for reminding me what it means to be human." Catherine squeezed his hand, and although she had no strength, managed to whisper something that filled the room with warmth. "Thank you." When it was time to leave, Lauren smoothed the sheets. Rachel stood next to the stretcher. Catherine looked around, as if wanting to remember every detail of that room that had been synonymous with loneliness and pain for so long, but now held memories of reunions and sincere tears. Before walking through the door, she looked up at the ceiling, took a deep breath, and whispered softly with a peaceful smile, "Thank you, God. You waited for me." She closed her eyes for a moment. Everyone held their breath, fearing it was goodbye, but it wasn't. She was still there, alive, with a peace on her face that had never been seen before. And room 17, witness to so many silences and miracle, now held the image of a woman who was leaving not to die, but to live her last days with dignity, surrounded by the love she had always dreamed of. The car stopped in front of Rachel's simple house, with white painted walls and blue windows that reflected the afternoon light. It wasn't big, but it had a warmth that couldn't be found in any hospital. When they opened the door, a sweet smell wafted out into the street, like freshly baked cake. Rachel went in first to prepare the place to welcome her mother. The plants scattered around the room seemed to smile, as if they knew that the house was going to have a new life. Lauren helped Catherine into an armchair near the window. The sun shone gently on her face, and she closed her eyes, breathing deeply. "It smells like cake," she whispered with a tired smile. It had been so long since she had felt that. Rachel knelt down beside her, tucking a blanket around her feet. "I always bake cornbread on Sundays, just like my adoptive mother used to. Now I'm going to make it for you, too." Catherine looked at her daughter with tears in her eyes. She ran her trembling hand through her hair, as if finding a part of herself. She didn't need to say anything. The gesture said it all. The hours passed, and the house changed color. Soft laughter came from the kitchen, where Lauren and Rachel chatted while stirring the pots. Catherine. In the living room, she sang softly, an old song with one of those simple melodies that remain stored in the heart since childhood. "Mom," Rachel came over and sat down next to her. "I know that song." Catherine smiled with a weak but sweet voice. "I used to sing it to you to help you sleep. When you were a baby, you always closed your eyes before the song was over." Rachel brought her hands to her face, moved, so it wasn't a dream. "I remembered that song, even though I didn't know where it came from." The two hugged each other there for a long time, feeling that they were rebuilding a history that time had tried to take away from them. At the end of the afternoon, Lauren brought some children from the neighborhood to visit. They entered timidly, carrying flowers they had picked from the yard. Catherine opened her arms, as she had always done in her life, and soon she was surrounded by little laughter. She told short stories, made up rhymes, and showed them how to turn scraps of fabric into improvised dolls. Rachel, leaning against the door, watched silently. Her heart ached, and at the same time filled with peace. It was like watching a wound close little by little. The house, which had once been filled with routine and loneliness, now breathed life, smelled of cake, plants in the yard, soft music, and tears mixed with laughter. It was the beginning of something new. Two women rediscovering what it meant to be mother and daughter, not because of the time they had lost, but because of the love that, though wounded, had endured everything. Reguina's birthday arrived quietly, without much preparation. She didn't want a party, just her mother's presence. But in that house now full of life, even the simplest things became something big. Lauren brought flowers from the yard. Some neighbors arrived with plates of food, and a small table was set up in the living room with a chocolate cake in the center and improvised candles. Catherine, sitting in the armchair near the window, watched every detail with tears in her eyes. She couldn't believe she was there inside a house surrounded by love, watching her daughter celebrate another year of life in front of her. When they lit the candles, Rachel came over to cut the cake. Everyone sang "Happy Birthday," laughing and clapping, but Rachel's eyes were fixed on her mom. When the song ended, she leaned over, kissed Catherine on the forehead, and whispered, "Having you here is my best gift." Catherine smiled, took her daughter's hand, and, her voice almost breaking, replied, "No, Fila, I'm the one who wants a gift." Everyone laughed in surprise. Rachel wiped away a quick tear and asked, "What do you want, Mom?" The room fell silent. Catherine took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment, and replied slowly, "I want to sing you a lullaby." Rachel stood still. Her heart beat fast, as if it recognized something she had been waiting for years. A song. Catherine settled into the armchair. She took another deep breath. Her voice came out weak, almost like a thread, but strong enough to fill the room with tenderness. It was a simple melody, an old one, with the slow rhythm of someone who had sung it many times before. Rachel brought her hands to her mouth. The tears came without warning, without restraint. "That's what it was," she said between sobs. "That's what I heard in my dreams." She knelt in front of her mother, resting her head on her lap as the song continued. Catherine's voice wasn't strong, but it was wasn't it? Every word was a stitch closing the holes in Rachel's soul. When the song ended, the whole room was silent. Lauren was crying softly. Andrew was discreetly wiping his eyes. Rachel lifted her tear-stained face and pressed her mother's hands against her chest. "Thank you, Mom. Now I know I was never alone." Catherine smiled, and in that moment, the birthday ceased to be just a date on the calendar. It became an endless party etched in the memory of everyone who was there. A small but eternal moment where mother and daughter were reunited in a song that had never died. The days at Rachel's house began to take on a different rhythm. There were no luxuries, but there was warmth. Lauren, who couldn't stop thinking about that story, began to visit frequently. She always arrived carrying a bag, clothes that patients had left behind, donated toys, packages of rice, beans, and sometimes fresh flowers she found along the way. Catherine received each item as if it were a very special gift, but what made her happiest were not the objects. It was the visits. Lauren did not come alone. She brought children from the hospital, girls and boys who were undergoing treatment and needed hope. The once quiet house was filled with soft laughter and little footsteps running between the plants. Catherine, though weak, did her best to sit among them. She took pieces of old fabric and colored threads, and with trembling hands, taught them how to sew simple dolls. "Look," she said, smiling, "we don't need much. Sometimes what seems invisible is the most valuable thing." The children listened attentively. Enchanted by every story she told, she spoke of nights in the squares, but also of simple miracles. Bread shared with strangers, a hug that warmed more than a blanket, faith that never died. Rachel watched in silence, moved. It was as if she saw the mother she never had revealing herself before her, teaching not only the children, but everyone who was there, that true love does not need money to exist. One autumn afternoon, with the cold wind coming in through the cracks in the window, Catherine asked for paper and a pen, and Rachel tried to stop her. "Mom, don't tire yourself. Leave that for later." But Catherine smiled firmly and replied, "There are words that cannot wait." With effort, she wrote slowly, with her hand trembling. The letters came out crooked, but full of life. It took her almost an hour, but when she finished, she folded the sheet carefully and gave it to Rachel. "Keep it. Only read it when I'm no longer here." Rachel tried to insist, but her mother just closed her hand around the letter. The silence said more than any words. On that piece of paper was written, "Love does not die with the body. It blossoms in every gesture. Look for me in the little things, in the wind that blows in a child's laughter, in the smell of freshly baked bread. I'll be there, forever." Rachel held the letter close to her heart, holding it with both hands, tears falling without regret. Catherine just smiled, and in that moment, they both understood. It wasn't a goodbye yet, but it was already a preparation. An eternal bond was being formed, made of simple words, but ones that would last forever. The sun had barely risen when the house was filled with a different kind of silence. It wasn't the heavy silence of the early morning, but a soft one, as if even the wind had stopped to respect the moment. Rachel had been awake since early, sitting next to her mother, tenderly stroking her white hair, as if wanting to remember every detail of that face. Catherine breathed slowly, her chest rising and falling slowly, as if each breath were a gift. She opened her eyes for a moment and found her daughter's. A small smile appeared on her tired lips. "Mom," Rachel whispered with a broken voice. Catherine raised her trembling hand and touched her daughter's face. The gesture was weak, but full of love. "Thank you," she whispered, "for letting me be a mom again." Rachel was already crying, but she didn't want them to be tears of despair. She held her mother in her arms, settling her on her lap, as if they were switching roles in life. "Rest, Mom. I'm here." The room was filled with a strange peace. Catherine looked up at the ceiling as if she saw something that normal eyes cannot see. And then, with the most peaceful smile she had ever given in her life, she closed her eyes and stopped breathing. Rachel pressed her mother's body against her chest, crying softly, but at the same time feeling that there was beauty in that farewell. It was not a departure of abandonment. It was a farewell of reunion, of mission accomplished. Minutes later, Lauren rushed in. She found Rachel sitting hugging her mother with tears running down her face. She ran toward her, but when she saw the scene, she didn't say anything. She just knelt down and hugged Rachel tightly. The two of them stayed there in silence. There were no words that could explain the mixture of pain and relief they felt. It was the end of a story of waiting and the beginning of a peace that was finally coming. Catherine left on a quiet morning in the arms of the daughter who waited her whole life for that hug. And even though the pain was tearing her chest apart, Rachel knew her mom left smiling, and that in some way was a greater gift than any words could express. The days after Catherine's departure were filled with deep silence. The house, which had once been full of children, smells, and songs, now seemed like a temple of memories. Rachel spent hours with her mother's last letter in her hands, reading it over and over again, as if it were a map to follow in order to go on living. Lauren, always nearby, was her constant support. It was during one of those late-night conversations, between tears and cold coffee, qu'elle essayed what she had been keeping in her heart. Lauren, I can't let my mother's story die with her. It was during one of those late-night conversations, between tears and cold coffee, that Rachel said what she had been keeping in her heart. Lauren, I can't let my mom's story die with her. Lauren looked at her friend in surprise. What are you thinking? How many old people like her are out there alone, invisible, waiting for a hug that never comes? Rachel swallowed hard, her voice breaking. I want to do something. I want to create a place for them. A home where no one is left out, where no one dies forgotten. Lauren took her hand, moved. Then we'll do it together. Let's name it after her. That's how the idea for the Catherine Foundation was born. The first steps were difficult. Paperwork, registrations, asking for help. But Catherine's story had already touched too many hearts to be ignored. When Andrew found out, he didn't think twice about joining. He himself helped open the doors of St. Mary's Hospital, offering an area to start. This hospital saw her reborn, he said firmly. It is only right that hope for many more should be born here. Over time, the foundation took shape. Simple rooms were furnished with donations, beds brought by families, makeshift furniture filled with clothes, and, most importantly, arms ready to welcome them. Rachel, seeing the first group of elderly people enter, felt her heart beating fast. They were men and women with tired looks, many without families, others abandoned. She welcomed them one by one, as if they were pieces of her mother returning to her. Welcome. No one will be alone here, she said with tears in her eyes. Lauren organized everything, running back and forth, bringing medicine, warm clothes, and toys to cheer up the visitors. Andrew, for his part, walked among the beds listening to stories, touching wrinkled hands with respect. And one afternoon, when everyone was gathered for their first meal as a group, Andrew raised his voice and said something that will remain engraved forever. Now, no one dies forgotten. The silence was broken by applause, tears, shy smiles, and in the eyes of each old person, there was something that neither time nor abandonment could take away. Hope. The Catherine Foundation was not just a place, it was a heart beating strongly, reminding everyone that love is never too late. What if it were your mom? What if she were now in some corner, invisible to the world, waiting for a hug that never came? This story is not just about Catherine, Rachel, or Lauren. It is about all of us. It is about the value of looking at those who often go unnoticed, about not putting off until later a hug, a word, or forgiveness. I want you to think fondly. What would you do in Rachel's place? Would you have the courage to open your heart after so much pain? Or in Lauren's place, would you have listened to that inner voice that said, "Don't give up. Something isn't right"? Comment below. I'm going to read every response carefully because every opinion matters. And more, give a hug today while there's still time. Don't wait until tomorrow to say, "I love you." If this story touched your heart, click the bell so you don't miss the next videos. Stories that heal, that make us think, that remind us of what really matters. And don't leave without clicking on the video that's already on the screen. It's such a moving story that it made thousands of people cry and reflect. I assure you, you'll feel like you're part of it. Click now and experience another story that will touch your heart.